Most men who call themselves nice never planned to be that way. It wasn't a conscious choice. It was a survival strategy. You learned early that calm faces kept the peace. That silence avoided conflict. That people like you more when you didn't ask for much. And somewhere along the way, that lesson turned into an identity. You became the nice guy. At first, it felt good. People called you dependable, kind, emotionally intelligent. You became the one who always showed up, who understood, who made things easier. You thought that was the path to connection, that being good would mean being loved. But no one told you the price of being the nice guy is that you end up loving everyone except yourself. It starts small. You say yes when you want to say no. You smile when you feel invisible. You listen to other people's problems, but never share your own. And over time, you start to forget what your own voice even sounds like. You think you're choosing peace, but really, you're avoiding truth. You think you're being strong, but you're actually disappearing, and the world rewards you for it. At work, they call you the reliable one. In friendships, you're the good listener. In relationships, you're the safe choice. Everyone gets what they need from you, except you. But something changes when you start to notice the silence after you help. You give and give and give, and when it's your turn to need, nobody's there. You start to realize that the warmth you give others doesn't come back. It vanishes into the air like steam from a cup you never get to drink. And one day, you catch yourself staring at your reflection, not with anger, with confusion. You wonder, when did I become the background in my own life? That's when it hits you. Being the nice guy wasn't about kindness. It was about fear. Fear of being disliked. Fear of being called selfish. Fear of being truly seen. Because if people saw what you really wanted, the boundaries, the anger, the hunger for respect, they might not stay. So you learn to shrink, to smile, to manage everyone's comfort except your own. But here's the part no one tells you. The moment you stop trying to be nice, the world won't collapse. It will just get quiet enough for you to finally hear yourself. That's the beginning of this story. Not when you break down, but when you start to wake up. When you realize that the cost of always being good is never being real. And once you see that, there's no going back. Because the truth is simple, but brutal. You can't save your relationships by sacrificing your self-respect. And you can't love others if you're constantly betraying yourself. That's where it all starts to shift. Not with rage, not with revenge, but with a whisper inside that says, no more pretending. Every nice guy can trace his story back to one thing: approval. Somewhere in his past, he learned that approval is the currency of love. He learned that if he stayed small, polite, and helpful, people smiled. But if he spoke up, disagreed, or showed anger, love disappeared. For some men, it starts at home. A father who demanded obedience but never gave warmth. A mother who praised compliance but punished defiance. He learned early that emotions make people uncomfortable, especially his own. So, he became what everyone needed him to be. In school, he was the quiet kid who never caused trouble. In relationships, he became the one who always apologized first, even when he wasn't wrong. He thought this was maturity, when really it was submission disguised as empathy. Society reinforced it. Movies, teachers, even girlfriends said, women love nice guys. So he believed it. He thought kindness would protect him from rejection. He thought patience would earn him love. But no one explained the difference between being kind and being spineless. He started following invisible rules. Never make anyone uncomfortable. Never say what you really think if it might upset someone. Always be available, no matter what it costs you. Always forgive, even when they don't deserve it. Always smile, even when you're breaking inside. He didn't realize those rules were chains. They kept him polite, yes, but powerless. Because every time he swallowed his truth to protect someone else's comfort, a part of him died a little. By the time he reached adulthood, he'd mastered the art of invisibility. He could walk into a room and instantly adapt. He knew how to read people, to predict what they needed, how to make them feel safe. But when you spend your life being who others need you to be, you forget how to be yourself. And the irony? No one truly respects the man who can't say no. The same people who called him kind started to use him, not out of cruelty, but convenience. He became the emotional janitor, cleaning up everyone else's messes. A friend calls at midnight. He listens. A colleague dumps extra work. He agrees. A girlfriend crosses his boundary. He forgives. Because he doesn't want to be the bad guy. He doesn't want to lose their approval. But deep down, resentment grows like rust under paint. He tells himself he's strong for enduring it. But what he's really doing is slowly erasing himself. And one day, something cracks. Maybe it's the girlfriend who leaves him for someone who takes charge. Maybe it's the boss who praises his hard work and promotes someone louder. Maybe it's just the exhaustion of being good and invisible at the same time. That's the moment it hits. Being the nice guy never earned him love. It earned him permission to be used. And that realization burns. Not because it's cruel, but because it's true. Because suddenly, he sees the world clearly for the first time. He sees how much he gave, how little came back, and how every yes that bought him peace actually sold him pieces of his soul. He starts asking questions he never dared to before. What if I stopped being so understanding? What if I said what I really think? What if being nice isn't noble, but cowardly? And once those questions start, they don't stop. Because once a man starts to question his own programming, the system begins to fall apart. It always starts quietly. A single moment when the mask slips, and he feels it, the weight of years spent holding back. For this man, it happened on an ordinary Thursday. He was sitting across from his girlfriend, listening, again, as she explained why she needed space. Not because he'd done anything wrong. In fact, that was the problem. She said, "You're perfect, but I don't feel the spark." He smiled politely, nodded, and said the same thing he always said, "I understand." But for the first time in his life, he didn't. Because deep inside, something screamed. A voice that had been silent for years finally spoke. "I'm tired of understanding." He walked home that night under streetlights, hands buried in his pockets, and the truth hit like a brick. No one ever chose him for who he was. They chose him for what he provided: comfort, safety, validation. He wasn't a man to them. He was an emotional service. And when that realization comes, it's like grief. He replayed every moment in his mind. The birthdays he remembered, the late-night phone calls, the gentle words he offered when others were cruel. He thought kindness was a kind of power. But now, it felt like weakness disguised as virtue. That night, he didn't sleep. He just sat in the dark, scrolling through old messages, watching the pattern repeat. Always him reaching out first. Always him apologizing. Always him trying harder to keep something alive that was already dead. There's a unique kind of anger that comes when you realize your suffering was self-inflicted. It's not the world you want to destroy. It's the part of yourself that allowed it. He started noticing things he'd ignored before. Friends who only called when they needed something. Coworkers who dumped tasks on him because they knew he wouldn't say no. Even family members who praised his patience, but never once asked how he was doing. The illusion shattered, and beneath it, bitterness. Not because he hated people, but because he hated his role in their lives. He had built his entire identity around being dependable, predictable, harmless. And now he saw how that identity had caged him. There's a moment every nice guy faces when he realizes kindness without boundaries isn't kindness. It's self-abandonment. He started withdrawing, stopped answering every call, stopped volunteering for everything. He thought maybe that would make people appreciate him more. Instead, they got angry. One friend said, "You've changed." Another said, "You're not as nice as you used to be." And that hurt because for so long, nice was his only identity. But the deeper truth was this: he hadn't changed. He just stopped pretending. That's when the bitterness peaked. He looked at himself in the mirror, really looked, and realized he didn't like the man staring back. Not because he was cruel, but because he was hollow. He had spent years being good at the expense of being real. And when a man sees his own reflection and doesn't recognize it, that's the breaking point. He started questioning everything. Why do I apologize when I'm not wrong? Why do I chase people who don't choose me? Why do I fear being disliked more than being disrespected? Every question peeled back another layer of illusion. Every answer led him closer to a truth he'd avoided his entire life. You can't earn love by erasing yourself. That realization doesn't make him angry. It makes him quiet. A dangerous kind of quiet. The kind that comes when a man finally stops begging for understanding and starts demanding self-respect. From that silence, something new begins to grow. Not bitterness, not revenge, but a cold, calm clarity. He realizes that being the nice guy wasn't a moral choice. It was survival. A strategy born from fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of being alone. Fear of not being enough. But now he understands. The price of that fear was his own identity. And no one, not a girlfriend, not a boss, not even society, deserves to own that much of a man's soul. That's when he stops trying to be liked and starts trying to be free. When a man finally stops performing the role of a nice guy, what comes next isn't peace, it's emptiness. For the first time in years, he's no longer living for validation. But that leaves a question he's never asked before. Who am I without it? At first, it feels like withdrawal. He doesn't text as much, doesn't over-explain, doesn't rush to fill silence with comfort. The people around him notice, and they don't like it. They say he's become cold, but in truth, he's just done being consumed. He begins to observe the world with new eyes. He sees how men are conditioned to trade authenticity for acceptance. 1,000 tiny cuts of self-betrayal dressed up as politeness. Every it's okay when it's not. Every don't worry about it when it hurts. Every time he swallows what he should say just to keep the peace. He realizes now, peace at that price isn't peace. It's surrender. The shift doesn't happen overnight. It's slow, quiet, and sometimes brutal. Because when you stop defining yourself through others, you're left face to face with the man you've avoided. The one underneath all the pleasing, the smiling, the apologizing. He starts journaling. Not because it's trendy, but because it's the first time he's hearing his own thoughts clearly. He writes things he's never dared to say out loud. I'm angry. I'm lonely. I'm tired of pretending to be okay. And with every word, something loosens inside him, the tension that's been holding him hostage for years. He also starts saying no. The first few times it feels wrong, almost sinful. His heart races, his palms sweat, his brain screams you'll lose them. But then something amazing happens. He doesn't. The world doesn't end. And he realizes every time he says no to something that drains him, he's saying yes to himself. He starts training again, not to impress anyone, not to post about it, but because his body feels like a fortress that's been neglected. He begins lifting weights, running, meditating. At first, it's physical, but soon he notices something else changing. His posture, his breathing, his energy. For the first time, he walks into a room not looking for approval, but radiating calm authority. And yet, there's still moments of relapse. He catches himself apologizing unnecessarily. He still overthinks text replies. He still feels guilty when he sets boundaries. But this time he notices that's progress. Awareness is the first stage of transformation. He starts to understand a deeper truth. Being nice isn't the opposite of being strong. It's what happens when strength is never developed. Real kindness doesn't come from fear of conflict. It comes from confidence in your values. It's the difference between being agreeable and being grounded. So he begins testing his new self. He disagrees in conversations, respectfully but firmly. He asks for what he wants without shrinking. He lets silence linger without rushing to fill it. He watches people's reactions. Some pull away, others stay. But he's no longer measuring his worth by who stays. One evening, he meets an old friend, the kind who remembers the old him. They talk and the friend laughs. Man, you've changed. You used to be so easygoing. Now you've got edges. He smiles, because that's exactly the point. You should have edges. A man without them isn't soft. He's shapeless. That night, he writes again, I don't want to be liked by everyone. I want to be respected by myself. It's a quiet revolution, invisible to most, but seismic within. He's not chasing peace anymore. He's building it. And as strange as it sounds, solitude becomes a kind of sanctuary. Not loneliness, solitude. There's a difference. Loneliness is when you're empty and need someone to fill you. Solitude is when you're full and choose to keep it that way. He realizes now that the world isn't kind to quiet, self-assured men because they can't be controlled. But that's fine. He no longer wants to fit in. He wants to stand firm. Because real freedom doesn't come from being loved by others. It comes from finally loving who you are when no one's watching. There comes a strange moment in every man's rebirth, the point where solitude stops feeling like protection and starts feeling like distance. He's built new boundaries, claimed his time, and found a rhythm that finally feels like his. But then something inside starts whispering, "You've become too good at being alone." It's not loneliness, not exactly. It's the realization that strength isn't just about detachment. It's also about connection. Because even warriors need warmth. Even stoic men crave to be seen, not as protectors or providers, but as human. He begins to test that edge again. He meets people, not with his old nice guy mask, but with presence. He no longer sells his soul for approval. Instead, he listens calmly, attentively. He's not chasing connection anymore. He's inviting it. At first, it feels awkward. He doesn't know how to show emotion without fearing it'll be used against him. He's seen too many examples of men mocked for feeling too deeply, too much. So he hides it behind humor, behind silence, behind the easy shrug. But one evening it breaks. He's sitting in his car after a long day. The kind where everything feels heavy, but he can't point to a single reason why. The streetlights blur through the windshield, and that familiar ache in his chest returns. Not depression, not sadness, just weight. The weight of all the words he never said. The apologies he gave that weren't his to give. The moments he minimized himself to make others comfortable. And then it hits him. Maybe vulnerability isn't weakness. Maybe it's the courage to not pretend. He calls a friend, not one of the loud, surface-level ones, but the quiet one who's been there since the beginning. They talk for 2 hours. No advice, no fixing, just truth. For the first time, he admits, "Man, I've spent years being what people needed me to be. I don't even know who I am when nobody needs anything." The friend pauses and says, "That's the point. You gotta find out now." It's such a simple line, but it lands like thunder, because he realizes this is what true strength looks like. Not emotional armor, not dominance, not detachment, but the capacity to stay open even when it hurts. He starts to see the difference between isolation and independence. Isolation is a wound disguised as wisdom. Independence is knowing you can stand alone, but choosing connection anyway. He begins opening up in small ways, not oversharing, but being honest. He says, "I don't have it all figured out." He admits when he's tired. He allows moments of silence instead of performing comfort. And something unexpected happens. People start trusting him more. Because vulnerability, when anchored in strength, doesn't repel, it attracts. In a world full of curated perfection, authenticity becomes magnetic. And it changes how he sees relationships. He's no longer trying to earn love. He's building it through mutual truth. He's no longer rescuing people. He's walking beside them. He's no longer afraid of being misunderstood because he's finally clear on his own story. He's still kind, but it's a different kind of kindness now. Not the kind that bends until it breaks. The kind that stands tall and says, "I see you, but I won't lose myself to help you." He understands that a man's heart doesn't need to be hard to be strong. It needs to be whole. So he learns to rebuild, not from pain, but from presence. He lets life be simple again. Morning coffee, a run in the cold air, a good book, genuine conversations. The little things become sacred, because that's where peace hides, not in perfection, but in presence. He looks in the mirror and doesn't see a nice guy anymore. He sees a man who's learned to be both gentle and unyielding. A man who knows that empathy isn't a weakness. It's emotional intelligence in motion. A man who doesn't need to prove anything anymore. Just be. And that's the quiet irony. The world never taught men how to hold both power and softness. But the ones who learn They move differently. They don't seek attention. They command it by existing authentically. He used to think being a man meant holding everything together, the calm voice in the storm, the rock everyone leaned on. But lately, he started to see that rocks don't feel the wind. They don't bend, they don't grow, they just erode quietly over time. Modern masculinity, he realizes, isn't about being unshakable. It's about being aware. Aware of your emotions, aware of your limits, aware of the invisible rules you've been following without question. He starts looking back at his old definitions of strength, all those silent expectations he inherited without choosing. Never cry, never ask for help, always be the solution. And for the first time, he sees how small those rules made him. Because real strength isn't about control, it's about capacity. The capacity to feel pain and not let it harden you. The capacity to listen without trying to fix. The capacity to love without losing yourself. He remembers his father, stoic, reliable, but emotionally unreachable. He loved his dad, respected him deeply, but he can't remember a single time the man said, "I'm proud of you." That's how men were taught to show love. Through provision, not presence. And he wonders how many men were raised on that same diet of silence, mistaking it for discipline. So, he decides to break the chain. Not in rebellion, in redemption. He starts talking to younger guys differently. When a friend opens up about burnout or heartbreak, he doesn't brush it off with, "You'll get over it." He says, "That sounds tough. You don't have to carry it alone." He realizes leadership isn't about dominance. It's about emotional permission. When one man shows it's safe to be real, others follow. The world's definition of masculinity is shifting, quietly but undeniably. The men who once hid behind sarcasm now talk about boundaries. The ones who feared rejection now talk about peace. And the real rebellion isn't rage, it's self-respect. He begins journaling again, something he hadn't done since college. At first, he feels stupid writing "Dear Me," but as the pages fill, he finds a voice he hasn't heard in years. Not the critic, not the caretaker, the witness. The one who watches without judgment, the one who says, "You're trying, and that's enough." Every entry becomes a small act of defiance, because no one taught men that introspection could be an act of strength. They were trained to take action, not to take inventory. But this time, he's not fighting the world. He's meeting himself. He starts redefining his worth, too, not by what he provides, but by how he shows up, with integrity, patience, presence. He no longer measures his success in the approval of others, but in the peace he feels when he's alone. The biggest realization comes quietly on an ordinary morning. He's drinking coffee, sitting by the window, the city still half asleep. And it hits him. He doesn't need to prove his goodness anymore. He's not the nice guy. He's just a good man. There's a difference. A nice guy acts out of fear, fear of rejection, fear of disapproval, fear of being alone. A good man acts from choice, from groundedness, from alignment, from truth. He's still kind. He still helps people, but it's no longer a transaction. He doesn't give to be seen. He gives because it feels right. And that subtle shift from validation to authenticity changes everything. He notices how the right people respond differently now. They respect his boundaries. They don't take his silence as indifference, but as self-control. They don't expect him to fix their chaos. They meet him in his calm. And that's the quiet revolution of modern masculinity. Men are no longer trying to win the world approval. They're reclaiming their peace. He's not walking away from love, from friendship, or from care. He's walking away from distortion, the version of himself that believed love had to cost pain. And as he does, something powerful happens. He stops waiting for permission to exist as he is. This is strength, not the loud, aggressive kind, but the kind that moves like still water, steady, deep, unafraid. He finally understands being a man was never about proving you could endure pain. It's about proving you can live without pretending. There's a stillness that comes after years of noise, not silence, but peace. It's the kind of calm that doesn't demand attention, doesn't need to announce itself. It just is. He used to chase this feeling in other people, in approval, in love, in validation. He thought peace was something you earned. Now he knows it's something you protect. His mornings look different now. No endless scrolling, no racing thoughts. Just coffee, sunlight, maybe a few lines in his journal. And that quiet inner voice. No longer a critic, just a companion. He still has doubts. He still gets tired. But he doesn't hate himself for it anymore. Because healing, he's learned, isn't about becoming untouchable. It's about making peace with your humanity. He walks through the city, headphones in, the same streets that once felt suffocating. But now, they feel alive again. He notices things he used to miss. The rhythm of footsteps, the sound of laughter spilling from a cafe, the way the wind carries conversations like fragments of small stories. For years, he was part of everyone's story except his own. Now he's finally the main character. Not the savior, not the sidekick, not the fixer. Just the man who came back to himself. He used to think walking away meant giving up. But now he understands. Walking away is how you begin again. He walked away from the need to explain himself, from the guilt of not being enough, from the people who only loved the version of him that was convenient. He's not bitter, he's awake. He sees how much energy he spent trying to keep things together that were never his to hold. He sees how being nice often meant abandoning himself. And he smiles because now he finally knows the difference between kindness and self-betrayal. There's a moment that sums it all up. He's at a dinner with old friends, people who still half expect the old him, the agreeable one, the always available one. The conversation turns personal. Someone jokes about how he's gone quiet lately. He laughs softly and says, "I just learned that peace and people-pleasing don't coexist." They laugh, too, but he notices the silence that follows. That brief pause when truth lands deeper than words. It's the kind of silence that says they get it, even if they won't admit it. That night, he walks home under a pale streetlight, hands in pockets, no weight on his chest. And it hits him, this is it. Not the climax of a movie, not a grand moment of revelation. Just the quiet knowing that he's finally living in alignment with who he really is. He's not waiting for someone to choose him anymore. He's already chosen himself. Not out of arrogance, out of responsibility. Because when a man learns to honor his own peace, he stops being dangerous to others. He stops hurting from his unhealed places. He's not the nice guy. He's not the tough guy. He's just a man, aware, calm, imperfect, and free. He's no longer chasing intensity. He's seeking consistency. He's no longer addicted to being needed. He's anchored in being known. And that's the hidden truth behind why modern men are walking away. It's not rejection, it's reclamation. They're not leaving love, they're leaving conditional love. They're not avoiding responsibility, they're redefining it. They're not weak, they're finally strong enough to stop performing strength. When he looks back, he doesn't see wasted years, he sees education. Every heartbreak, every silent resentment, every moment of self-doubt was a lesson in boundaries, identity, and truth. And he realizes something powerful. Sometimes the bravest thing a man can do isn't to fight harder, it's to stop fighting himself. As the screen fades in your mind, imagine him sitting again by that same window, the one where he once felt trapped. Now, the light hits differently. Same man, same place, different piece. Because the price of being the nice guy was losing himself, and the reward of walking away was finding who he always was.